Has anyone else set an intention and since setting that intention felt like they've been incredibly misunderstood and as a result isolated? Because that's been the topic or the theme of my year. So without further ado, I want to get into what's called visionary solitude. And this is going to go through what that process looks like in your journey, especially as you're growing in your purpose and growing into your business. And more importantly, how you can utilize this moment of solitude to grow abundantly in your truth and as a result in your wealth. And so without further ado, when we get into what visionary solitude is, this concept is really about a period of isolation. And it's not a coincidence that when you set that purpose out for yourself, to then achieve to others, I mean, for one, you get so excited because it's like, yes, I finally have this purpose that I can go out and achieve, and you want to tell the world about it, right? So then when you start telling people, I'm gonna do my best to kind of make this, there we go. When you start telling people what your purpose is, for one, you have to continue to fine tune it. So understanding what that looks like is one thing. Sharing that with other people to relay and understand that communication is another, right? So when that happens, people get confused. And as a result of that, might even be offended by the things that you say. And you get taken aback because you've presented yourself in a certain way for so long, and now suddenly people feel like they don't know you, they don't understand you, and you're wondering why people are misinterpreting what you're saying. And so as a result of that, you do become isolated for a period of time. But I like to call this visionary solitude because that's when you can really focus on your internal growth, because it's at the moment outpacing your external environment. This is the process of shedding. So anybody closing out the year or even starting the year in the middle of the year, figuring out how to clear out that space. If you've heard me in my other videos before, the biggest eye-opener for me has been the book of Genesis. Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, and then have dominion over it. So this is that's part of that process, because you have to clear out things that no longer serve you to now move forward in your truth. But in order to do that, you have to remove yourself from all the distractions that you may face, and that can be socially, which means the people around you who you've confided in, who you've spent so much of your time with, who you've poured so much love into, is going to misunderstand you in everything that you say. And when that happened to me for the first time, I was in such shock that it even happened, because I was being mislabeled as this terrible person. And for a long time, I was a people pleaser. I didn't want to speak to frankly on certain topics, wanted to be politically correct and, fit into this mold where hopefully people would understand my communication, when rather, as I continued to explore and find more understanding and have more experience and have fuller context of what's going on, filtering myself wasn't doing anybody good, especially not me. And if you don't pour into your own cup, what are you gonna do? And so when I began speaking up on my truth, and a lot of it is experimentation. When I'm communicating with other people, I always say this is the point of where I'm at right now, and how I want to relay this information is an experimentation of the culmination of experiences that I've had to then have me come to this conclusion at this point in time. And so in doing that, it is incredibly important to remember that people aren't where you are. People aren't going to understand what you've lived. And I always also like to say that the path that you walk is for you and you only. And in this moment of visionary solitude, it's important to remember that the only way you can go on this path forward is to support you through the experiences, because you're the only one that's lived them. And that's why when you do step into that purpose, no one else has this purpose but you. So who better than you to support you? And if you don't stand firm in your truth, you're not going to be able to move forward and then be able to serve other people. So God has a very interesting way of really sharing that with us and closing ourselves off so then we could clear out the space to then open ourselves up in a different capacity. So I found this really interesting fact on Harvard Business Review, and interesting in a sense of I understand deeper as I go through my own business and journey as a CEO, as a framework architect, as a visionary. And 50% of CEOs feel lonely. And I can resonate with that because at the end of last year, I was in Japan, I was with my family, and I was having a conversation with my partner, and I was explaining to him how I felt like I didn't fit. Like a lot of the social outings that I'd go to with my friends, I'm sitting here like I could be figuring out my purpose. I could be figuring out how I can better my craft. I could be figuring out how to fine tune the work that I'm doing. And I was just so unhappy, and I didn't want to put that on my friends, but I know it came off that way. And I didn't know how to release that, because what do I look like telling my friends like, oh, you're not really doing me any good. I don't want to be here right now, you know, and backing off of the socialization in a very casual way. It wasn't fulfilling me. I felt like I was just losing more time, and I didn't want to feel that way, especially with the people that I love, you know. But then how do you explain that to people? And I thought that through this process, it could have been more valuable to share, like, hey, let's be accountability partners. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's continue to grow as friends. And as a result, we can grow as people. We can grow to help the world. We can grow in any capacity and space that we align ourselves with. Turns out you can't really, not everybody's going to be your accountability buddy. And that was a hard lesson to learn, because you want to come up, or at least I did, I want to come up with the people that are around me. Like, I don't want to be at the top by myself. And the only way to do that is if we grow together. But the reality is we all grow at different paces, which is how we even end up in this solitude. What's even more intriguing is that 61% of those CEOs say that they have performance impairment. And it's a psychological trip when you go through that experience, especially because, like I said before, the people that knew you the most, or you thought knew you the most, is going to understand you. I went through a whole psychological trip when one of my closest friends misunderstood me. And it was because, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it was really because I've noticed a pattern of how the waves of, in the different chapters of relationships that she's had, has culminated into how damaging it became for her as a person. I didn't want to see her hurt, and I wanted to hopefully help her move in being more confident in herself, but that came off in a really harsh way. And I know I can be very harsh. My friends know me now. I've removed all of the sugarcoat, and I'm like, I'm gonna just tell you how it is, and you can take it how you want to. And in that moment, I did say, like, hey, if you don't take a moment to reflect on yourself, it's gonna be hard for me to be your friend. And when you hear that, it's like, oh, she wants to cut all ties with me. No, it's, I know we're growing at different paces, and in order to better serve you, I have to better serve myself, to then share with you that if these are I can't be around these patterns, and if I continue to do that after working so hard not to succumb to another human being, and in the process be closer to my spirituality, to my relationship with God, I have to remove myself from that. And if that means that somebody that I love is doing that in the process and not actively working to grow out of that, or recognize when it's happening, I need to separate myself. So it's not personal to that person, but more so personal to the values and the journey of what my assignment has been that I need to uphold. And so when that happened and I was misunderstood, it was a shock. I didn't really know what to think of it. And then on top of that, it wasn't presented to me as an issue until several months later when I reached out and said, hey, I feel like something's off, and I just want to say that I do love you. And I know that I knew what I said. That was the harder part. I knew what I said, and I wanted to let them know that even though it's harsh, I hope they understand that it's coming from a good place. And I've been in positions where people have told me something harsh. I know that that's just been the reality of my life. My family is cutthroat. They gonna tell you how it is you take it or leave it. And I wrestled with that for so long, but after wrestling really throughout my entire childhood, after hearing some of the harsh things about, being a filmmaker, and that's a hobby, and even though you're getting paid, you're not getting paid enough, so it's not really like your true career, and you need to do better with your life, and you're telling people to do all these things, but you're not taking your own advice. It hurts, because I'm like, I'm doing my best to do that, and it doesn't feel like constructive criticism in a way where I can utilize this as an opportunity to grow myself. But in reality, it was. So I really hope that in that process of growing out of, the friendships that I've had earlier this year and stepping into what it is now, that through action and through showcasing, not even showcasing, but staying true on my path will help us come back together. Because again, the visionary solitude is not a forever thing. It's just a chapter in your life. And so this impairment really is a result of the shock. It's the initial shock that you experience when you are misunderstood. But in that process, there's a few things that happen. One, you may want to feel the need to prove yourself to that person. And funnily enough, this is really the 5 stages. Well, there's 7 stages of grief. I actually did a video called The Healing Project. It was an EP where I experimented with music, and we talk about these 5 stages, the 5 stages of grief, and loosely mention the other 2 in those songs and in that storytelling process. But it's not linear. It happens in different ways. You get angry, you're here to explain yourself, and you're pushing more of your information onto them, and that's not really helpful because you didn't get through to them the first time. And this isn't to say that your approach is different and then they might begin to understand you, but they might not. Sometimes space in between that time is critical for you to not take it personally how they're reacting because of the state of which they're in that moment, and ensure that you know the intention in which you are moving to then hopefully provide information that could be of support to them. And if not, take a moment to take a step back and say, okay, well, I'm going to continue on this path of where I'm at, and there's no hard feelings, and I still love you. I think people miss that in realizing what it means to be incredibly truthful in how you share information, be truthful and be kind. And it's an interesting dynamic and balance in how we approach that. So you seek to prove yourself, and sometimes, at least for me, that shows up in the work that you do. And that starts to come into your purpose. So when you do begin to be truthful, when you do set your values, when you do set your boundaries on how you want to have this approach, as a result, it becomes your life's work. And it's funny how that happens, because if you say this person isn't understanding me, well, let me figure out a way to deliver this in a way that I'm doing with you all right now through YouTube, is communicate better to then explain how you can outgrow this stage of performance impairment. It's having several iterations of, okay, how is the way that I'm communicating being delivered to people? How are people delivering? How are people receiving it? And how am I now able to serve them through the message that I'm sharing? So this is the communication, the radio, the signal waves that you receive. So for me, it was writing a book. That's what I did back in March, and it was it was me pouring out the result of what you can get if you wrestle with your mental capacity to operate in the outside world and take it back inside of yourself to support you, because you are the one that's gone through your path and you're the only one witnessing everything that you see. How do you stay confident in what that looks like? And so that's the iteration process. And then as a result of that, you begin to have solace in who you are, because you're now able to explain to yourself, well, it's not that. You're shedding. Now you're able to slowly shed the process of that grief and that hurt of why do I have to go through this alone? Because funnily enough, you're not alone. You're just finding new people. And this right here is just really the process of subduing to make space. And so as a result, these end up going hand in hand. And once you get to this point of solace, and sometimes you'll have solace and then you still feel like you have to prove yourself, and then you're angry again, and then you have to work and have iteration. So again, not linear, but as you continue to go through this cycle, right, then events happen along the way as we experience this. They might come back, they might be angry with you, you want to have further discourse and this, that, and the third. So a lot of that again, but you begin to notice the patterns of how that works. But as a result, your progress slowly makes its way go up. And it might even be like more of that type of a structure. So that's really the reality of what it is to separate yourself from the norm. Because especially in this world, a lot of people think, oh, it's fine to be degrading to yourself, almost like, oh, I suck. Oh, I'm not good. Oh, the world is falling apart. Oh, there's so much negativity that's going on in your life. And to separate yourself from that, you're going to be misunderstood. I know I mentioned Myron Golden like literally every single video, but it's so profound in how he delivers his communication, and I aspire to have a level of communication to that degree, to have that understanding with all the messages that I deliver, is that, even with Jesus and the story of, and God in general, like if you read through the Bible, and this is for me more so reading the Bible as a storybook and to understand the principles and the themes of what it's telling you. God, even in his in how he's navigating this universe and space, is being misunderstood, or has been misunderstood in so many ways. So what made us think that we wouldn't be misunderstood and think that we'd be able to just keep elevating as a result of it? So that's just something to think about, like regardless of what spirituality or what you practice, I think it is important for us to remember that it is common to be misunderstood, because even God gets misunderstood. So moving into the visionary gap, right? And this is also, again, Myron Golden. And I am learning and practicing from the lessons that he teaches, because he, again, breaks it down in such a critical way of how to really understand, these different processes, and to be able to layer the communication through all of this. It is important to really see how we are able to, I'm looking through my notes here and trying to talk at the same time, to see how you can separate yourself from the hurt and the pain that you've experienced as a result of this solitude, recognize it as something that is visionary, and then fill the gap between the two to then elevate to the highest level. So here we have the 4 levels of value by Myron Golden, that he also got from the book of Genesis, which I thought was really incredible. Go take a look at his stuff so you can understand what I'm talking about here. But for me, this was the perfect way to break down in my adulthood and throughout this process of business, and your unique path of how you can create a course essentially for your life's path. Same way as in college, when you have this road to your degree, you can literally create a 4-year or shorter collapsed time path to then fulfill your business. So the imagination level really comes down to what you think your grand idea is, right? I think starting here is critical to be able to really say, okay, this is the work that I need to do to get done. And when I do discuss this imaginary level, and as it relates to the misunderstandings of what happens, when you have this large vision for yourself that people cannot see, again, you're going to be misunderstood. So when you begin to share that with people here, initially, there's going to be a lot of confusion until you get your iterations down to realize that you may not be speaking clearly. It's important to have accountability and recognize, okay, my delivery may not have landed the way that I have intended it to be. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to land every single time. I just have to continuously perform and improve myself so that the message that I'm here and set to deliver gets conveyed in the proper light. And then once you get through that, it comes down to the unification level, which is management. How do you manage these processes, especially as you're being misunderstood, right? Well, if you work from the top down, even in any company that you work with or any space that you're a part of, the energy of a space comes from top to bottom. If the energy at the top is messed up and they're taking advantage of people, they're not paying people in the right way, they're not listening, then everybody on the bottom is going to say, why do I care, right? So it's important for us to always keep that in mind, and that's where the iterations of our communication then is able to unify how we manage. So when we get into, even with friendships and people that you may want to come on board, I know for me, it was like, I want all of us to win. I want us to work together so we can win. But if they're not aligned with that, one, you have to recognize, okay, that's not something that they may be aligned to, and they may not want to do that, and you might be forcing them into something. And that means you have to broaden your horizons to then find people that do make sense of that. But that all comes down to the implementation. And that takes work, where your time is always more valuable than money, but you have to use your time to make the money, to make your system and your engine move in the direction that it needs to go. So yes, you have this grand idea. You think that you could make millions and millions and millions of dollars off of this, and I just got to get through it, but it still comes back down to the implementation. So we have to go through all of these processes in order to continue to grow. And it's really cool to see, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a, let me set aside several hours today and it's done. No, this is something that happens over a lifetime. And the more you get comfortable with knowing that this is something that and that's important. I'm jumping around, my brain is moving really fast. That's why it's important for us to realize that once you select your life's purpose, it's something that doesn't stop. And that's the beauty of it. And that's going to give you the motivation to keep moving through the work until you can get that unification of, for example, for me, when all of this, the misunderstandings, I felt lonely, I didn't know where to go, I finally decided that I'm going to go to a workshop on financial capital, because I was obsessed with learning and understanding financial literacy. I was like, I have to know this. I'm not going to be in a position where I am at the top, or I'm even at the bottom and not know what to do with myself. I have to have the right resources, and I know what's out there, so I have to go find that. Went to a workshop. I connected with several different people, but it's one person there that stood out to me, and just so happens to be the one and only Miss Daphne O'Neill, who I now have the Mind Economy series with. And she was in a similar state of where I was at, in being misunderstood, and this is my mission, and this is what I have to do, and this is how I can serve people. But we aligned in that. And I was like, oh, if you're really down, if you're serious about this, then let's figure out what we can do about it. Boom comes the Mind Economy series. We're like, okay, cool. So now we have a way for both of us to manage the work that we do, so we can focus and hone in more on our skill set. So that's why the implementation stage is incredibly important, because even though you might not be making a lot of money during this period, you are fine-tuning your skill sets. And as a result of fine-tuning your skill sets, when you unify, and find the right person to work alongside you, you can continue to focus on your skill set or what you're good at, what your strengths are. And that opens up your time even more, and you're collapsing your time of how long you have to struggle and be on the struggle bus. So then for us, we moved into writing our book, the Mind Economy series. And this could happen in several different ways. I'm currently, as I am recording this with you all, I am learning how to be a better communicator, how I can better teach, how I can better convey a message, as I've said earlier. And Daphne and I have continuously done the same. We're like, how do we go through all of these iterations to do that? So funny how as we do this, now we're slowly beginning to see how we're fulfilling the imagination and the vision that we once saw way back when. We've always been a mindset kind of gal, like both of us as people, and even the team that we're continuously growing around us. We've been so focused on, okay, it is a mindset thing. It is something that we have to continue to iterate until we get to this point. And that's how you begin to fill the visionary gap, because you're going through this cyclical cycle of, okay, I have this idea. Okay, let me put in the work. Let me find the right people. Let me convey this message, and let's make sure that the vision gets delivered. These all work hand in hand, and it's like a spiral motion. Today I learned the process of what a flywheel is, and maybe I'll show a couple of pictures of what Amazon and Uber has as the definition of a flywheel. But this, I just thought about it right now, is what a flywheel is. And this is like your journey and the cyclical expansive journey of how you can grow and in your business. So this is really the process of what it looks like. It takes time. It doesn't seem like it makes sense in the beginning, but it does all come together. But in order for you to do that, you need to be alone. You have to have that visionary solitude to realize that, one, what your purpose is, and then two, how you can deliver that purpose in a way that is serving to God and that's serving to your truth and your purpose. In doing so, it's important to audit how ready you are to even do that. And if you haven't heard me say it before, I reverse engineered this entire structure and this process through a handbook. So this is inspired by my framework through Visions that I apply really in every part of my life as a guidebook to really understand how I can navigate the world. But Visionary Readiness Handbook is how I break down the structure of how you can deliver, how you're ready, and break out of your own visionary solitude. So we start with mindset, then we get into vision, and then we work our way into framework. If you don't have the mindset, it's really hard to even clear out the clouds inside of your brain to see what the vision really is and to see why you've been placed on this earth. You have to figure out why you're placed on this earth, but in order to do that, you need to clear out you need to subdue. You need to subdue all the clutter that's in your brain to then see the vision and develop a framework, and then from that point, reverse engineer. So everything that I really mentioned, that doesn't look too sexy, but that's okay. Everything that I mentioned is a cyclical nature. I mean, it's just the law. It's law. I don't know how else to but this is how you could really fill that visionary gap, and really the steps and the frameworks to really get there. So starting with mindset, it is cultivating that inner strength. It's, are you emotionally ready? And I love this image that was generated. I actually created this presentation with Canva AI, and I put in as detailed of a prompt as I solemnly can, and I will put that right here to really iterate, there goes that term again, to get the desired outcome that I want. And this is really cool because we are like a tree. I learned a lot from a tree. I learned a lot from hugging a tree. I learned a lot from being in nature and camping and I haven't camped enough. I would like to do more camping trips and experiences, but I did learn a lot from the times that I have been able to camp. You have to plant your roots so deep so that you don't topple over by any given windfall. Now, not all trees make it, right? And that happens over time, but the deeper your roots go, and that's your emotional capacity and your emotional readiness. And this is really how you cater to your inner child. Do you love on your inner child? Do you give your inner child a hug? Do you physically close your eyes and envision the little girl or the little boy or the little individual that once was to hug them and be like, hey, I know everything that you've been through as a person, because you are that person, and I can now give you the support that you need, that you felt like you couldn't get externally anywhere else outside of God. And man, that's like the most important thing that you have to do for yourself. And in the process of doing that, you begin to see the pockets and the spaces of, well, when did I feel insecure when I was a child? When did I feel like I wasn't enough? When did I feel like I didn't get the support that I needed? And you can begin to fill those gaps. This is the process of getting to the root, as I like to call it. You have to find the root cause of where your emotions are boiling from, so then you could tackle it head on. It's like if you were to say you have, I don't know if I have any business really talking about, you know what, I'm not even gonna get there. Just don't deter yourself and find all the reasons around what could be happening without attacking the actual cause itself. I think that's just really the main point that we want to have here. And as I put here, like really building that mindset is essential, because when you nurture that internal stability, you can now confront challenges with resilience, because can't nobody attack your insecurity now, because you already made it known. For me, it was financial insecurity. I felt like I wasn't enough because I didn't have materialistic things, because I didn't have the money to support other people. But there are plenty of other ways I've been able to support people. Emotionally, I know I've given some pretty valuable advice to people. I have a vision of how I want to see and foresee what that looks like. And all of these things can be learned, but by now addressing my weakness, if somebody's like, oh, you can't do such and such because you're broke. Okay, I already knew that, and I'm still making it work. So now what? But that was a big hurdle that I am still learning to overcome. Like, you know, you hear people in music always talk about like you still grinding like you broke, because it's a chip on your shoulder that you continue to have. And I hope that those people know too that they are capable of growing out of that and now finding a new balance once they've outgrown the chip of being broke, to then say, okay, now how can I move from a state of abundance as opposed to a state of survival? So that all comes back down to mindset. Moving into your vision and navigating your purpose and the creative compass. I was confused at what I had here for a second, but it's because this is actually part of what we discuss in UBC, Unlocking Business Consciousness with the Mind Economy series. So if you ever see those terms, that's what I mean by that. And this is really understanding your direction. So once you understand your purpose, you understand the root of where all of your pain is coming from, you can now heal that, grow past that, find a vision for, okay, what did all of these lessons teach me, and how can I now be of service to other people, and how can I continue to move forward in that? So that's really where this comes from. And it's really understanding the why of what you're doing. And this is really cool, because when you couple Visionary Readiness Handbook with what Daphne and I wrote in Unlocking Business Consciousness, you begin to create a roadmap for how you can achieve everything that anybody has ever told you you couldn't achieve in the first place. And, you know, being able to navigate that in the state of uncertainty, because you're going to hit several bumps in the road. There's like plenty of rocks and things that you didn't think would be there, and yet here we are, right? Like that, you're going to hit those bumps on the road. You're going to fall flat on your face several times. It could be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, literally. You're going to fall flat on your face, but because you have the mindset of, I know where the root cause of this is coming from, you can now resolve that. You're your own doctor in how to have the resolution that you now need to move forward in your life. So that's where the vision comes from. And then lastly, with the framework. So now that you have identified your pain points, you've identified your own pain points, you understand the lesson that it taught you to now move forward in your life, you can now see the purpose in which you were placed on this earth to do, to then reverse engineer the vision that you saw from the last step of this structure, to then create a framework to propel you forward. This is pretty fascinating and cool to me, because it's so similar to, and of course I've done a lot of studies on this to really get a grasp of what this looks like and the steps to take it, which is where the Visionary Readiness Handbook comes from. You do have this checklist to then ask yourself these questions, document it, and navigate what that looks like. And it's, again, a non-linear process. However, the more you fine tune, like, okay, now I realize that there's something missing from my mindset. What does that look like? Okay, how do I apply this to my vision? Okay, now that I've gotten this and I see the future that I have for myself, how can I create a framework to now navigate back to the vision that we have to really, get to that point? So again, this all comes back down to that cyclical nature of, I could actually create a flywheel here, so that'll be pretty fun. I'm gonna wrap up pretty shortly here because, well, it's that time. So, mindset, right? Your growth starts with your mindset. By getting to the root cause, like I've mentioned before, and really understanding how you can break out of your own habits and awareness of limitations that you've once had, you can now develop a vision that is not based on external factors telling you that you should be a certain way and that you should mold into this certain box. The only way that you're going to break out of that is if you continuously tell yourself, I'm not going to fall under the status quo. I'm not going to fall under what people tell me. I'm not going to succumb to the damage that is being placed on us by the news that they're sharing with us. It's all propaganda. It's all, a brainwashing mechanism for us to, fall into their own mold to stay trapped, and we want to break out of that. So you have to have that vision. Now, as a result, you can create that framework, and by building that framework and by having those iterations, you're like, oh, this might not be working. This might not be working. Oh, but this is working. Oh, this is something that I've noticed in myself that I need to continue to grow past from. And then you have to look back into your mindset, and as a result, you continue to grow. So this is a loose structure of what this flywheel structure looks like as you continue to build and shape and exponentially grow how you can step into your purpose. And yeah, I hope this was really helpful and I hope I've been able to explain myself and continue to convey this message in its proper perspective light. I appreciate everybody that's been able to come here, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks, guys.